let me tell you one of the most tragic and honestly most important stories in the history of medicine. It's about this doctor, right? He figures out this shockingly simple way to save countless lives, and you'd think he'd be celebrated, hailed as a hero, but nope. Instead, he was ridiculed, rejected, and ultimately driven to a tragic end. This is the story of Ignaz Semmelweis and the paradox that still carries his name.
Okay, so the mystery really kicks off right here. It's 1846. We're at Vienna's world-famous General Hospital, and they have two maternity clinics. Now, in the first clinic, run by doctors and medical students, more than 11% of women died after giving birth. Think about that, more than 1 in 10. But in the second clinic, run by midwives, the death rate was way down at 2.7%. That's a staggering 4 times lower. Same hospital, same year, a terrifying difference.
So this leads to a really tough, horrifying question that everyone was whispering about, and it haunted one young doctor in particular. Why were the highly trained medical experts killing so many more of their own patients? Let's set the scene. We're in the mid-1800s, and giving birth was just terrifyingly dangerous. There was this mysterious illness called childbed fever that was like a plague on Europe's hospitals, targeting new mothers. And nowhere was it worse than in that prestigious doctor's clinic in Vienna. And this is where our main character comes in, Ignaz Semmelweis. He's the 29-year-old Hungarian doctor, the chief resident at the clinic. And he took it so personally. He became completely obsessed with the deaths he was seeing every single day, and he was absolutely determined to solve this deadly puzzle. So Semmelweis, he basically puts on his detective hat. He started by ruling out all the popular theories. He's like, okay, could it be an epidemic? Some kind of bad air? Well, no, because then it should have hit both clinics equally, right? What about overcrowding? Nope, he ran the numbers, and the stats just didn't back that up. I mean, he got so desperate, he even changed the route the priest took to give last rites. He thought maybe the little bell on the priest's cart was literally scaring women to death. Can you imagine? Nothing worked. And then, a total tragedy gave him his first real clue. And you can just feel how crushed he was. In his own words, he said, life seemed worthless. Everything was in question. Only the large number of deaths was an unquestionable reality. He was surrounded by death, just frantically trying to find a pattern. The pressure must have been immense.
So here's that clue I mentioned, and it's heartbreaking. A close friend of his, Professor Kolechka, got accidentally poked with a student's scalpel during an autopsy, and he died a little while later. When Semmelweis looked at his friend's autopsy report, it was like a lightning bolt. The inside of his friend's body, it looked exactly the same as the hundreds of women who died from childbed fever. He realized it had to be the same disease.
This was it. This was the connection. If his friend and the mothers died of the same thing, it must have the same cause. For his friend, it was obviously the cadaveric particles from the autopsy knife. And then Semmelweis made this incredible leap of logic. The doctors in his clinic would perform autopsies and then go directly to the maternity ward to examine women in labor. They were carrying these invisible particles, what he called decaying animal organic matter, straight from the dead bodies to the mothers on their unwashed hands. So, he has his theory. And if he was right, the solution was so simple, it was almost ridiculous. Just wash your hands. Get the stuff off.
So, in May of 1847, Semmelweis made it a rule. Every single doctor and student had to disinfect their hands in a chlorine solution before they touched any patient. And the results? They were just, wow, absolutely immediate, totally miraculous. The mortality rate in his clinic plummeted from a horrifying 11.4% all the way down to just 1.1%. He was saving lives, and it was working like magic.
But, he didn't stop there. His theory kept evolving. There was a sudden outbreak where 11 out of 12 women in the same row died. He traced it back to one patient with a nasty uterine cancer. Another time, it was a patient with an infected knee. That's when he realized, oh my God, it's not just from dead bodies. The deadly matter could come from any infected person. So he made the rule even tougher. Disinfect your hands between examining every single patient.
Now, you'd think this is where he gets a parade, right? They name a hospital after him. He's a hero. But that is not what happened at all. Instead, what he got was disbelief, ridicule, and just pure hostility. And this, right here, is the central paradox of his whole story.
So the big question is, why? Why on earth would anyone fight against something that was so clearly saving lives? Well, there were a few reasons. For one, it flew in the face of the popular miasma theory, the idea that disease came from bad air. But the big one, the one that really stung, his theory implied that the doctors, these respected gentlemen, were the ones killing their patients. And oh boy, they did not like that. It was a massive insult. On top of that, he was a Hungarian outsider in Vienna, his work got tangled up in hospital politics, and the whole idea that a complex disease could have one simple cause was just too wild for them to accept.
Just listen to this. This is from a leading medical journal at the time. The condescension is just dripping off the page. They basically treated his incredible, life-saving discovery like some weird old fad that smart people shouldn't even be talking about anymore. Now, you might hear this myth that, oh, he just didn't publish his work, that's why no one believed him. Yeah, that's just not true. The historical record is crystal clear. His work was presented all over Europe in lectures and letters. His colleagues knew. They absolutely knew what he was doing and what his results were. They knew, and they still chose to reject it. And all of this rejection, it leads us to the final and just devastating chapter of his life, and also to his ultimate vindication, which, sadly, he would never get to see. And check this out. This is basically the perfect proof. After he was forced out of Vienna, he went back to Hungary and took over a maternity ward in Budapest. First thing he does, he brings in the chlorine hand washing. And what happens? The death rate plummets to less than 1%. And back in Vienna, the clinic he left, they went right back to their old ways, no more chlorine washing, and guess what? The death rate shot right back up over 10%. I mean, the proof could not be clearer.
But all this fighting, all this rejection, it just broke him. He became angry, bitter, writing these furious letters calling his opponents murderers. Finally, in 1865, his own colleagues and even his wife tricked him into an insane asylum. And in the most gut-wrenching, cruel twist of fate you can imagine, he was beaten by the guards, got a cut on his hand during the struggle, it got infected, and he died 2 weeks later. He died of the exact same kind of infection he had spent his entire life fighting. He was only 47.
But here's the thing. His genius went even deeper than just hand washing. His real revolution was philosophical. See, before him, diseases were defined by their symptoms. But Semmelweis was the first to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't define a disease by how it looks. Maybe we should define it by its one single cause. That was a massive shift in thinking.
And that, right there, that's his real legacy. That idea, one cause for one disease, basically laid the entire foundation for what would become the germ theory of disease. He set the stage for giants like Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister.
And how long did it take for the world to catch up? 15 years. 15 years after his lonely, tragic death, the work of Pasteur and Lister finally proved that Semmelweis had been right all along. Those invisible decaying particles he talked about, yeah, they were bacteria.
So yeah, the recognition came, but way too late to save him. But history eventually got it right. And today, we know him by the title he so deeply earned, the savior of mothers.
And I think this quote really gets to the heart of why he succeeded where others didn't. It wasn't just about being smart. He was driven by this incredible empathy. He couldn't stand to see all the suffering, and that's what kept him digging for an answer when everyone else was content to let it go. So this whole story leaves us with a pretty challenging question, doesn't it? It's a powerful warning about how our own egos, our beliefs, and our resistance to change can blind us to the truth. And it really makes you wonder, what life-saving ideas might we be rejecting today simply because they feel uncomfortable or because they challenge what we think we already know?